Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. I'm your host, Sheil Kapadia. We're on to week 2. Everyone's had their week 1 takes, but now we're going to look at storylines that actually matter going into the weekend. So we're cutting through the noise of the small samples and the overreactions and the randomness and all that. And we're focusing on storylines that actually matter. And to discuss those, thrilled to be joined by my Ringer colleague, senior editor, friend, Lindsay Jones. Lindsay, first team we're talking about is the Las Vegas Raiders, and they are part of a Monday night doubleheader, which I just found out like yesterday, a 10 p.m. kickoff Eastern time for East Coasters like me, but you are Mountain Time Zone. Are you thumbs up or thumbs down on this Monday night doubleheader?
Well, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm thrilled to be here and potting with you once again, but I don't know who ever asked for Monday night doubleheaders. I don't know who exactly this is for. And yes, I am an old person, and an 8 o'clock kickoff here in my lovely Mountain Time Zone, it's just too late. I don't know how you people live on the East Coast. 8 o'clock kickoff is just completely unacceptable.
8 o'clock unacceptable. 10 o'clock. The coffee intake is going to be very interesting for me on Monday, but fun matchup. Raiders, Chargers. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about other week 2 storylines when we come back. This is the Ringer NFL show presented by FanDuel, and the NFL is officially back. So if you're going to be in it with FanDuel. They've got the goods, futures, live betting, SGPs, your way bets, all of it. The app's clean, it's fast, and yeah, when you win, you get paid instantly, which is nice because Sunday patience doesn't exist. So get your bets in, build something bold, and make every game feel bigger. Download the FanDuel app or head to FanDuel.com/RingerNFL to get started. The Ringer is committed to responsible gaming. Please visit rg-help.com to learn more about the resources and helplines available, and listen to the end of the episode for additional details. Must be 21 plus and present in select states, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Paid endorsement. All right, let's get to it, Lindsay. So we've got 3 storylines we want to talk about today. Storyline number 1 has to do with the Las Vegas Raiders. And the storyline is, are the Raiders this year's feel-good surprise playoff team? You know, they get the win in week 1 against the Patriots. Best vibes, maybe, of any week 1 team. Geno Smith giving Pete Carroll the game ball, the locker room celebration. And now they take on a Chargers team that was very impressive in week 1. And I guess, as we might say at the Ringer, are the Raiders like a good, bad team? Or are they potentially an actual good team that could be in the playoffs? So what's your sort of temperature check with the Las Vegas Raiders going into week 2?
Yeah, I mean, they were really fun. And I'm like very intrigued about the entire AFC West. I mean, looking at the standings after week 1 and seeing the Chiefs at the bottom, that's kind of startling, right? I guess it's 1 week or whatever, but that's just not something that we've seen in a while. So, I think it was important for the Raiders to get off to that quick start. Going to New England is always really tough in week 1. We're talking about time zones, right? Going out to the East Coast, that's 10 a.m. for their bodies, having to start pretty early. So, they got off to a quick start. I mean, I think Chip Kelly scripted up the beginning of that game great. I mean, you just watch it and it was like bang, 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 chunk plays, Brock Bowers. It was like, oh, right. Okay. This team, like they're ready to go. And I think as the game wore on, maybe not quite as explosive overall. I mean, I think, it stalled out at some points. I think the run game was somewhat disappointing, but just in terms of what we wanted to see, like the Raiders looked functional. They looked fun to watch, and they got a win. So I don't know what else more they could have really wanted out of week 1.
I love the term functional because it's been a while for the Raiders. There's been a lot of dysfunction over the years, and specifically the last 2 coaches there, Antonio Pierce, Josh McDaniels. Even before then, there was plenty of dysfunction with John Gruden. So I'm with you. It just felt, and it's not totally vibes because they were, players liked Antonio Pierce. It seemed like you just felt like, all right, the coaching staff isn't necessarily giving them an edge. So it's got to be both those things. It can't just be the players having fun, smoking cigars in the locker room afterwards. So what Geno Smith did, I think that was a classic. This is why the hipsters love Geno Smith game. He was just chucking it downfield, tight windows, 9 completions of 20 plus yards in that game. It was a lot of fun what they did offensively. Now, looking ahead, the two things that give me some, I don't know if it pause or concern is the right word, but I want to see it again. One is the offensive line, because the offensive line was not great in that game. Ashton Genty did not have a great debut in that game. He had a couple nice runs, but overall the run game wasn't very good. And then defensively, I'm just going to keep looking at that roster and being like, how are they doing this? I think Patrick Graham did a fantastic job in week 1. He's done a fantastic job for years now with them, and their defensive line got off after the Patriots. But you just look at the talent on that side of the ball, and I think that's the big question going up against this Chargers team that was so impressive on that Friday night game against the Chiefs.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly what I'm going to be looking for heading into that game against the Chargers. Because, look, the Chargers offensive line way overperformed my expectations in week 1. And I think part of that is the Chiefs defense is pretty out of sorts right now. And that's something that I'm sure you'll be talking about on future pods coming up. But, this was a group that didn't have Rashawn Slater. I wasn't sure how this whole thing was going to work. And they were really good. Justin Herbert had tons of time. The Chargers passing game was just clicking that entire game. And with a receiver group that, I don't think any of us are this is a group of world beaters. We like Ladd McConkey, but, so I think that this is going to be a pretty big test for this Raiders defense. Again, I think that the Chargers offense is, I'll use that word again, functional. And they are going to throw the ball, despite how many times we heard on that Friday night broadcast, right? I can't believe they're throwing the ball. This is a running team. No, the Chargers are going to throw the ball. They're going to throw the ball a lot. And so I am very curious to see if this Raiders secondary is going to be able to hold up, and if they're going to be able to kind of keep up this pressure rate, right? I think they had 21 pressures in week 1. That was the most in the league. And it wasn't just Max Crosby. They were getting some interior pressure as well. And that's something that they're absolutely going to have to do that on Monday night if they want to be able to beat the Chargers and get to 2-0.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The 3-point underdogs at home. I think it's a winnable game. It's a game, you mentioned the standings. It's all right. You just click on the standings page once in a while this time of the year. And if the Broncos lose to the Colts and Raiders win that game, they are still in first place after 2 weeks. Last thing on this game, we get Pete Carroll versus Jim Harbaugh round 3. I don't know if you've thought about that yet.
I can't believe it took it this long to talk about that. This is the rivalry.
Yeah, it's the rivalry. Goes back Stanford, USC, Seahawks, Niners, and now we are blessed to get round 3 of Pete Carroll, Jim Harbaugh. It would just be so fun if there was some, handshake, squabble, someone running up the score, someone doing something untowards at the end of the game. I'm rooting for that. If I'm going to stay up till 1 a.m. Eastern time, I got to see something like that at the end.
And some of the best stuff with them has happened late in those games. So fire up the coffee machine. Let's stay up for it. I do think they've mellowed a little bit in terms of their rivalry. Last spring at the owners' meetings, they were next to each other in the picture and stuff. And I was all right, let's play this up. Somebody be the heel. Let's make this a real fun rivalry. So game 1, we can cross our fingers and hope for some sort of what's your deal? Because those are the best.
What's your deal? I actually looked earlier. I was Googling if there was what's your deal with Pete Carroll's face on a t-shirt. I was going on those custom t-shirt sites and looking at that. None out there. So if there's an enterprising listener who wants to put that together, I will definitely order one of those because that is still so classic. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We're talking about Pete Carroll's old team with our second storyline. This episode is brought to you by Verizon. Rookie debuts, underdog stories, bold trades. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing? A brand new phone with Verizon. Get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-In and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years. Get all of this whether you're a new or existing customer. Now that's value you can't beat. Swing by Verizon today. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Storyline number 2 for week 2 for me. Does the Seahawks offseason makeover already look misguided? So they lose to the Niners 17-13 in week 1. The offense has 14 first downs, 230 total yards, and 2 turnovers first game of that Clint Kubiak, Sam Darnold era. And now they go to Pittsburgh and they're 2.5-point underdogs. Justin Fields, in one of the bigger surprises of week one, carved up that Steelers defense. The Jets ran for 182 yards. And so if you're a Seahawks fan and you look at that, you say, our offense better look better and better respond here in week two. So what's your sense on the likelihood of that happening? And if it doesn't happen, what's sort of the panic meter at with this Seahawks team?
Yeah, I mean, they don't want to fall to 0-2. I mean, I think that's really when we're looking at the kind of the entire landscape of the league. This week, you look at those 0-1 teams and who's in big trouble if they fall to 0-2. And, that's a really bad spot to be in. I think the Niners, there's a lot of questions with them right now at this point, but in this division, we know it's going to be super competitive. So you do not want to start falling behind this early. I just think when I'm thinking about the Seahawks this year, I'm glad we just talked about the Raiders because that's kind of going to be this like cloud that's hanging over the Seahawks all year because we're going to be comparing how did Geno Smith play? And look, Geno Smith played awesome in week one. Yeah. And so I think we're going to always have this comparison of, well, what did Geno do and how is Sam Darnold playing? Maybe it's unfair to compare them, passing yards to passing yards and pressure rate and all of those sorts of things. But the fact is, the Seahawks lost a game because Sam Darnold committed a turnover in crunch time. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go into it, but ultimately, the knock on Sam Darnold for his entire career, outside really of, the first 12 weeks of last season, 15 weeks of last season, was that this is a guy who kind of fails in those clutch moments and turns over the ball a lot, is not careful with the football. And that's what happened in week one. So the Steelers defense, not great in week one, but historically very opportunistic. This is a team that, Mike Tomlin coach team that is going to get turnovers. They're going to get strip sacks in the big moments. That's one of the reasons that Mike Tomlin has that incredible record that we love to talk about so much, his streak of non-losing seasons. So I want to see Sam Darnold take care of the football. And if he can't do that for 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to be real worried about Seattle.
Yeah, I like your point about sort of the cloud, because if you're a Seahawks fan, you're watching what Pete Carroll does, you're watching what Geno Smith does. And by the way, you're watching what DK Metcalf does because, they're facing him in this game. I thought he looked really good, really fast, was doing different things for that Steelers offense last week. And when I was watching that Seahawks game, it just, other than Jackson Smith and Jigba, you're like, who's going to make a play for this team in the passing game? I mean, all the volume was being funneled to him and he had a nice game and he's a very good wide receiver, but it's just hard to get by when it's one guy and you're not sure who else is going to show up, whether it's Cooper Kupp or someone else down the depth chart. So that's a big storyline for me as well. And then it's just the whole sort of messaging with the Seahawks in the offseason that they tried to sell everyone on, hey, Clint Kubiak's going to be able to scheme around the offensive line. And they kept preaching two things. One is, hey, we're going to get back to a strong run game and our play action pass game is going to help the offensive line. Well, they ran for 84 yards on 26 carries last week. No running back had a carry longer than 8 yards in that game. And then they used play action on 2 plays. I mean, that was one of the biggest surprises of week one when you look at their preseason and you just look at, all right, this is what they want to do. That was also really strange. And I know Mike Macdonald addressed it after the game. So yeah, I'm curious to see with Clint Kubiak and this offense. It was only 1 week. Does it look different? Do they have answers against this Jets team?
Well, I love this time of year on the NFL calendar because week one, there's so much excitement, but we also don't really know what's going to happen. Right. And we've spent months, right? If you're a reporter who's out covering the league, a national reporter, you're going to training camps, or if you're a beat writer watching every single practice, and then us who are we're trying to consume all of that content and filter out like what's real and what's not. And they're like lying to us all the time, these coaches and these teams, and everybody is so optimistic about like what their new identity is going to be. And you can get really caught up in like, oh, this new coordinator, everything's going to be better, right? Because like that offense was pretty stale last year for a lot of reasons, and they needed to make some changes. And you can get really excited about Clint Kubiak, but ultimately, like, what has Clint Kubiak done to necessarily warrant like question. Everything is going to be better here. So Seattle's not the only team that we're in this circumstance, right? But like you have to make a lot of assumptions about this team is going to be better in 2025 because they've made change X, Y, and Z. But you don't really know until we see it. And I want to see just a bit of a larger sample out of what this offense is going to look like. Because ultimately, there's a lot of places where you talk a big game about the changes that you're going to see and why your team's going to be better, but ultimately your personnel is largely the same, or you can't make a wholesale, offensive scheme change in one offseason and have it click in week one. So, I think they're one of those teams that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Like at some point, that identity has got to match the language that we heard all summer about them. It just didn't happen right away.
I love that point because it also applies to Mike Macdonald, the language, the messaging, and then the actions. And in that game, they had a 4th and 1 from the San Francisco 19 with 3:24 left. Game's tied at 10-10. If you go for it, you're taking time off the clock, potentially score a touchdown that puts you up 7 instead of 3. Mike Macdonald, who I don't know if you've been following this, but all summer, chasing edges is like has been his big catchphrase. We're chasing it. And I believe him. It's a good catchphrase. I like that, chasing edges. But like, that's a spot where he said their analytical model, whoever's advising him on the headset, said to go for it. And he didn't think it was the right time. And he didn't go for it. And I thought that told us so much about what he thinks about his team. Because he's not one of the, he's not like one of these coaches who's like, oh no, we're not going to follow that. I'm going to go with my gut. Like he's got the process in place where he wants the information. He comes from Baltimore where they did that. He's a smart guy. But even having that information, he was like, I can't do it. I don't trust my offense to get a yard. I would rather trust my defense to stop the 49ers in this spot. And they didn't do it. They gave up a touchdown. So I thought in week 1 in a big spot, that kind of just told you a lot about maybe what Mike Macdonald thinks about his team and what he thinks about their best chances to win this season. So I'm keeping an eye on the game management with Macdonald too. Not because I think he's going to make dumb decisions, but I'm curious about what decisions does he make actually having the information and a good process in place. So that's going to be interesting this week as well. All right. Storyline number 3. Are the Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins, headed for the season from hell? Are they that team this year where you came into the season? You might have thought they were headed for that. Or you might have thought, you know what? They've been 28-23 with Mike McDaniel. They haven't been great, but they've been relatively competent. Week 1 was not competent. They got crushed by Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts. I thought they got outcoached. I thought Tua looked terrible. I thought the warts on their roster, offensive line, cornerback, were completely exposed. And now they return home to take on the Patriots. They are 1.5-point favorites in that game. If they fall to 0-2, it could get really ugly really quickly. What is sort of your vibe check with the Miami Dolphins going into this weekend?
I have been struggling to remember a team where the vibes were worse. The vibes were really bad all summer. Like this was like the bad vibe all-star team in training camp. Like even when you would try to find like the local coverage, I think you can kind of get this like positive spin on the team, and there just was none. There was no like why this team is going to be better than you think they are. It was really, really hard to find really any of that. And I think there was, you heard little bits of like, maybe, you think like, okay, they have Tyreek Hill. When Tua is healthy, they've been a really good team. Mike McDaniel can really scheme stuff up. Zero evidence of that in week 1. And I went back and I looked, and because I was trying to think, I was like, what other teams have had really bad losses in week 1? Like they can't be the only team that's like gotten blown out in week 1. And there's lots of teams that have lost by 15, 20, 30 points. In week 1, there's not a lot of examples of teams that have kind of turned it around. And the teams that have turned it around, there have kind of been you could have some sort of explanation. I went back. Do you remember the 2021 season? I don't know if you remember this, Sheil. Week 1, the Packers lost 38-3 to the Saints. It was this weird game. There was a hurricane bearing down on the Gulf. And so they played that game in Jacksonville. Aaron Rodgers threw 2 interceptions. They just got their asses handed to them. Jameis Winston, I think, threw like 5 touchdowns. It was like one of the best Jameis Winston games ever. And it was like, oh, what's up with the Packers? Like, oh no. How many interceptions did Aaron Rodgers throw the rest of the year?
2. All right.
The same as he threw in week 1. Yeah. They went on. They were the number 1 seed in the NFC. They were fine. That same week, the Titans lost by 25 points to the Cardinals at home. They went on, got the number 1 seed. Kind of a not that memorable of a Titans team. If you had said who got the number 1 seed in the 2021 season, I don't think anybody would right off the bat remember it was the Titans. But those are 2 examples of teams that kind of like got it together. That is not this Dolphins team. I do not think in any case the Dolphins have like the offensive infrastructure, the coaching stability, the kind of the culture around to be like, okay, we can get it together. Everything about this team screams, this is going to blow up and blow up fast.
You know what it is? They are, I think, the most fragile team in the NFL. Like, it's been like this for years. And that doesn't mean they're the worst team. They haven't been the worst team under Mike McDaniel, but most fragile team. Like, you can turn them on any given week and think, wow, they're putting up points. They have a real chance. But once things start to go bad, I think they just snowball. There's not, I hate to speak in football coach cliches, but there's no resilience to them. There's no like, oh, this team can overcome adversity, or to your point, this team can overcome a bad start. They're like a front running team where if they get out there and they're scoring touchdowns in the first quarter, yeah, they can beat a lot of teams in the NFL. But I really worry about things getting out of control when they start to go badly. And it feels like they started to go badly. And to your point, this isn't just this game. This is the end of last season. This is the offseason. This is Mike McDaniel coming in with a lot of pressure, maybe the hottest seat or one of the hottest seats in the NFL. And so you add all those things together. Now you have injuries at cornerback. They had a couple offensive line injuries in that game. So you add all this up and you're looking at it going, I don't know if it's going to get better. And they're one of the teams that we know who gets blamed when things go badly in Miami. I mean, Chris Greer has been around for 10 years. It's 2016, he was named GM, a 9-year stretch where they have not won a playoff game. They've made the playoffs 3 times, and it feels like he's still got really good job security. So if things go sideways, we know where it's going with Mike McDaniel. So I'm still like, I feel like, could they be an okay team this year? I think that's possible, but my opinion's going to be shaped in a lot of ways by whether they respond and are able to beat a beatable Patriots team this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, football-wise, if we're just talking like schematic stuff, I think the most problematic part or the concerning thing that's going on is that, we're 4 years into the Mike McDaniel kind of experience, and we haven't really seen any sort of like offensive evolution. Right. We kind of know that they do what they do, and when they have done it at their peak, they've been unstoppable. I mean, right? We all remember them scoring 50 plus, right? Against the Broncos a couple of years ago. And like, holy shit, this guy is taking over the NFL. Like his offense, the stuff that he was doing with motion, everything pre-snap, the way that he kind of like loaded his roster with all these speed guys, like we weren't seeing that anywhere. And now that stuff isn't really working. Defensive coordinators have largely figured that out because they haven't added a lot of new wrinkles to that. So, this week he's going to get to play, a Mike Vrabel defense who has been around a lot. I think the Patriots underperformed. I think we're pretty underwhelming, right, in week 1 by a lot of metrics. But I'm interested in that matchup, the Vrabel versus Mike McDaniel. What is this going to look like? And I want to see how Tua responds too, and just kind of like what this group is going to look like, and if there's going to be some sort of life in this offense.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Tua guy, but that did not look like usual Tua in week. He was completely flustered. I do think coaching had something to do with it. The Colts, Lou Anarumo, they were dialing up free rushers. He was inaccurate with his interceptions. And again, generally speaking, if you're a Dolphins optimist, they've been 38-25 when Tua starts football games in the regular season. So that was not necessarily the norm, but man, it did not look good there. All right. We're not skipping the hurry up today, but Lindsay's staying with me for the hurry up today because we've got this other Dolphins topic that we've got to mention. She talked about Tyreek Hill earlier, and we've got more off-field news with Tyreek Hill. His estranged wife has alleged in court filings via TMZ that he committed domestic violence in 8 separate incidents. And so, Lindsay, I wanted to talk about this sort of what's the league precedent with something like this, the potential investigations that could come out of it with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tyreek Hill is going to be a major storyline for this entire season. I think when we're, talking about on the field and now certainly off the field, and going back and rewatching that game, the Dolphins week 1 game, one of the things that really struck me was very early in the game, they were, the broadcasters, they always give these anecdotes, right, about like all the stuff that they've been hearing and what you talked about in the production meetings. And, the way that last season ended for Tyreek Hill was very ugly. It didn't seem like this guy was a guy who was going to be back in Miami. He didn't act like, it seemed like he wanted to be there, didn't seem like he wanted to have anything to do with Tua or with Mike McDaniel. And I think the feelings were fairly mutual at that point. And so the broadcast leads off with this anecdote about how like Tyreek Hill was coming to the barbecue that Tua threw. Yeah. And now we could trust him and he earned his trust back and all this stuff. And then flash forward to the second half and we see him ranting on the sidelines. 2 days later, we're getting, kind of this story about this really messy divorce and very concerning allegations that are in there. And it would be one thing if this was like completely out of character. But that is not the case for Tyreek Hill, right? I mean, we've been talking about very concerning off-field behavior involving domestic abuse with Tyreek Hill for more than a decade. 2014, he was kicked off the team at Oklahoma State after he was arrested for domestic violence on a domestic violence charge involving his pregnant girlfriend. The reporting there is horrific, right? What he was accused of doing in that case. He was drafted anyways. He fell a bit, right? In the draft boards, the Chiefs took him anyways. 2019, while he was in Kansas City, was investigated for child abuse after his 3-year-old son broke his arm. He was never charged in that case. The prosecutor was on the record saying that he believed a crime had been committed, but there was not enough evidence to charge either Tyreek Hill or his former wife. So this stuff has been out here forever. So when we think about something like this right now, where what we have right now, right, is sworn statements in a divorce proceeding. So this is nothing criminal right now. This is all like a civil proceedings. Unfortunately, we have a lot of precedent, right, of how the league handles stuff that is within the civil legal system, thanks to Deshaun Watson and some others. I don't expect that Tyreek Hill will be suspended, placed on any sort of commissioner's exempt list because of this. But it is something that is concerning. The league is going to do its standard, like we're going to look into this, its investigation. But this is going to be a thing, I think, this whole season, because when we're talking about Tyreek Hill and what is his future like in Miami, is he a guy who could get traded? Would a team want to trade for somebody who has all of this history, this and active stuff that is going on? My cynical suspicion is that yes.
Right.
We've seen it time and time again. I mean, I don't think it has scared the Chiefs off for a lot of players, and certainly not hasn't scared them off of Tyreek Hill in the past. So it's a really troubling start, I think, to this season, and something that we're gonna unfortunately have to be paying attention to more than just is Tyreek Hill gonna torpedo the Miami Dolphins locker room, their offense. It's also what is his impact going to be on the season in general.
Yeah, I'm glad. I thought the same thing with the broadcast, by the way. I'm glad you mentioned that. It's like, you don't have to do this anymore with this guy. I mean, he's got probably the most heinous off-field history of any player in the last 10 to 20 years. I mean, I don't have a list in front of me, but he's certainly on the short list of those players. And it's like, stop trying to do this. This isn't a one-time thing. Yeah. These are serious, legit, like I said, heinous allegations left and right, going back to his college days. And now it is a long time. Now he is a veteran in the NFL. So yeah, that very disturbing. Once again, Tyreek Hill, you never know with him. Just, you could wake up on any given day and there's a new headline about him with something very, very disturbing. And then to your point, the football side of it, if he is somebody that a team would want to trade for, could there potentially be league discipline at some time? So that's the football side of it as well. So glad we got that update in there. Wanted to cover it at some point this week on the Ringer NFL show. And Lindsay Jones, the perfect person to fill us in on the details there. All right, Lindsay, thank you for joining us. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing, Kiera Givens on social, and additional production supervision by Conor, Nevins, and Arjuna Ramgopowell. I'm Sheil Kapadia. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Ringer NFL show. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas, in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus and present in DC, Kentucky, or Wyoming. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit rg-help.com. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.